All right, thank you so much, Salvin. And thank you to all the guests for joining in. Welcome, and I hope that you guys enjoy your evening with us today. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting an international guest. Her name is Danelkiss Serra, and she is the Chapter Operations Manager for IIBA International. She supports the chapters globally and assists in many aspects of growing the membership and making sure that we are alive, energetic, and up for the challenges that IIBA brings us. She works with the regional directors and has about 120 chapters that she looks after with over 800 volunteers. So she's got a lot on her plate, but she's doing it very, very well. She's a BA at heart. She's a BA through and through and has always been a BA. She assists also with discovering solutions, developing relationships, and driving value. So help me welcome Danelkiss for today's session. She'll be talking on a very potent topic, which is discovering value, the most important component of agility. Thank you so much, Danelkiss, for agreeing to be with us today, and we look forward to hearing from you. Before we go into too much of the detail, there's some quick rules and other bits that we need to share with you guys so that you're well aware of what are the rules for the day. I'm not going to go through all of them because I'm taking it that you guys have probably attended one or two of our sessions. So I'll just highlight a few important ones. Please note the presentation will be about 25 minutes long. We will be taking questions on the chat. Feel free to post your questions there. We will be asking the questions at any point, but also right at the end of the conversation. The questions that we're not able to take in the session or not answer in the session, please feel free to go into the IIBA South Africa chapter LinkedIn page, follow the page and post your questions there. Danelkiss is going to follow the page and make sure she answers your questions there. So don't feel left out if you don't get your questions answered in today's session. As you know, it's quite a short session. Please make sure your videos are switched off, your mics are muted. There may come a point at the end of a session where we may allow you to speak, but it'll all be dependent on the time. Please also keep in mind that for future events, go to the IIBA South Africa page. You'll be able to see all the events so you can register yourself for them. If you also want to be a speaker for any of the events, we're welcome to it and open to it. There's also a link at the bottom, which is number 9, which speaks on the calendly.com view, which you can then use to book yourself in to speak. That's about it from my side. Have a lovely day and enjoy the session. Danelkiss, over to you.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here with you guys today, and it's an honor. I participated in your conference last week, and the energy was just infectious. And when Cathello reached out to me to speak with you guys today, I wasn't sure I could keep up with the energy you guys had last week. So let's see how this goes. So my topic today is discovering value and its most important component when we talk about agility. But before we get started, as Cathello mentioned, I work for IIBA. I am the chapter operations manager. However, I'm here today to talk to you as a BA. I've been in our industry for over 20 years now, actually. These are some of the organizations that I've worked for. You might recognize some of them. They're some Fortune 500 companies that might look familiar. While working at all these organizations, I have had every title you could think of. And I think we could all relate where we're not just business analysts, we're systems analysts, we're business architects. I've had the role officially of product owner as well. I've been a scrum master. I've literally been a little bit everywhere because at the end of the day, I do analysis. What you call me, I really don't care. As long as I am able to deliver value and deliver solutions for our community and make a difference, that's all that really matters. I want to continue to share a little bit more about myself because I think it's important. I got to know your community a little bit last week, but I wanted you to get to know me a little bit. And one of the things you'll often hear me say is that I'm big on the little things. Like the little things in life really do make a difference. And you're going to see that throughout my presentation today. I'm going to focus on a lot of things that you might sit back and say, oh, I already knew this. But it's always good to get that extra reminder and that aha moment of like, I haven't done it in a while. So again, focus on little things because they really do add up and make a big difference. The other thing that I'm known for is for thinking outside the box. I don't usually have conventional thought process. I think as BAs, all of us tend to be a little different than the norm. We process different, we evaluate things differently. So usually it's sometimes easy for us to think outside the box. And if we don't have that mood that day, because every once in a while we're exhausted or we need that extra motivation, if you're not in a place to think outside the box, at least think. Don't let others do the thinking for you. Don't just sit in the shadows and stay quiet. Always have a voice at the table. Always sit at the table. Even if you're just sitting and listening, you're still being active, and I'm sure you're still processing. So make sure you always have a voice at the table. These are some of my go-to in life in general that I focus on and just get myself to the next level. Some of the topics that we're going to talk about today in a very agile way, a little bit all over the place. We've heard about different perspectives and retrospectives. I want to introduce you to perspectives. We're going to talk a lot about communication because it's our foundation, discovering value proposition, and an even scale. And again, I'm going to be a little bit all over the place, but I promise it's going to come together. So with value. When we look at the word value, what does that mean to you? How do we determine what the value is and who is it important to? What does it actually mean when we say we seek value, we help you gain value? How could we look for something if we might not necessarily know what it is? Well, according to our BABOK, the BA body of knowledge, as well as our Agile extension, this is a definition that we have out there. Value is the worth, importance, or usefulness of something to a stakeholder in a context. Context is very important because what might be useful and valuable for me right now might not be useful and valuable for me later. So that's really important. But how important is value itself? Well, according to our BABOK, which is 514 pages, if some of you have seen our actual BABOK, within those 514 pages, the word value comes up 762 times. And if you look at our Agile extension, smaller book, 147 pages, it still comes up 321 times. So we talk about value constantly. Our reference guides absolutely talk about it. And then even if you look at the Oxford Dictionary, according to Oxford Dictionary, they still also use the word usefulness. I also included, if you notice at the bottom, the second definition with when it comes to our personal values itself, it's the principles or standards of behavior. That's important in life. So when we put all these together, I'm going to ask you another question. What is the most important component of determining value? And go ahead and add it to the chat. I think I'm going to be able to see the chat from here as well. So feel free to put in your input on what do you think is the most important component of value, of determining value. And I'm going to help you a little bit. I don't see anything coming through on the chat, so don't be shy. I'm going to help you out a little bit, except I clicked on the wrong place, so let me come back. And I'm going to embarrass myself to help you come up with what one of the important components of value, of determining value is. Yes, this is really me in many different facets of my life. If you start off over here, and I think you could see my mouse, I was probably 1 or 2 years old, and here I am with a little telephone in my hand. 8th grade graduation, I'm on the phone. My mom wanted to take a picture of me. Moving on, actually, they're not in any order. This is a screenshot from a scrapbook my sister made me for my 30th birthday. She was trying to prove a point, and now I'm going to use it to prove a point with you guys. So if you notice, as a little girl, I'm with a telephone. Senior trip, I'm on the phone. New Year's Eve, I'm on the phone. Somehow my mom always snapped a picture of me, always when I was on the telephone. And if you see this picture, we have a big coming out party, a big quinceañera, similar to a sweet 16. I'm not sure what you guys do in South Africa for like your debutante party. This was my debutante party, and my parents thought it was funny that they would make a telephone for me. And I see some of the things coming in. There's perception, satisfaction, utility, transparency. I actually like a lot of these responses for something I'm going to get into a little later. So remember those responses. But one of the things that, if you notice, they all have a telephone, and telephone symbolizes communication. In order for us to determine value, we need to be able to have good communication. In these pictures, that communication's all not that great. Half of those are fake phones, or I'm distracted with pictures while I'm trying to have a conversation. So it's important not only to have communication, but we need to make sure that our communication is effective. We need to make sure that the communication that we are having makes a difference to the people that we're having it with. We want to make sure that they are engaged, that they understand, that we understand them, and that it all comes together. Without effective communication, you're just going to have a little girl running around with plastic phones. Now, I usually do an activity. I've presented this before in person, and I usually do this activity in person. I still wanted to share it with you because you could take it back to your teams as well. Excuse me, or maybe you could help me come up with a way to do this virtually. But as little kids, since I was showing you all my kid pictures, I used to play telephone with my friends. And for those of you that haven't played telephone before, this is when you whisper something to the person next to you, and they whisper it to the next person. And by the time it gets all the way around the room, the message that's being delivered is completely different than what the message started. And everyone might have had all the great intentions in the world to repeat exactly what they heard and to get the message across properly, but that just doesn't happen. And the same thing happens in our world. The same thing happens in our organizations. As much as we think we understood the message properly from our stakeholders, there's an element of interpretation. There's an element of just being a SME sometimes. Sometimes you bring in your own knowledge from before and limitations, to be honest. You think you know how something's supposed to work. So when you're listening, you're really hearing and not listening and assuming what they're going to say or assuming what the needs are. And I think most of you have probably seen this image before or something similar. There's always memes out there where management asks for one thing or your stakeholders ask for something else. And this goes back to that communication that we're talking about and verifying that what we're hearing and what we're interpreting is actually correct. Now, some of the things that I want to just mention on top of it, because like I mentioned, I'm sure you've heard all these things before. They're just really nice reminders. Some of the barriers on when these wonderful trees swings occur could simply be language. For the most part, and actually you live in an area where you have different dialects. Even if we're both speaking English right now, English is actually not my first language. It might be, technically it wasn't my first language, even though it's the one I speak the most. I grew up with my grandparents as a little girl. They only spoke Spanish. So my first language was technically Spanish. There might be a barrier in interpretation, or even certain words that mean something in the US that might mean something totally different in South Africa. So take language into consideration whenever you're meeting with your stakeholders. Another key area is auditory versus written. Some people are very visual. Some people need all the process flows and the diagrams. Other people just need to hear it and sit in a meeting. Make sure you know your stakeholders. Make sure that when you first meet your team, whether it's agile, whether it's waterfall, it really doesn't matter. This kind of just goes across the board for everything. When you're on that scrum team, you want to have that dialect with your team. Maybe it's something as silly as playing the telephone game and then having this conversation of, hey, what do you prefer? Do you prefer to get an email or a text? Do you prefer for me to pick up the phone and give you a phone call? What is it that's important to you that is going to help us communicate better? And at the same time, with Agile, we tend to be short and bulleted, but some people need the full-blown explanation. Some people need a an entire paragraph that's going to explain all the ins and outs of what you're doing. Or with executive management, usually they don't read big paragraphs. They don't have time for that. It's short bullets, one right after the other. So you want to take into consideration, again, if it's long or not. Generational and cultural kick into that. Baby boomers tend to like those big paragraphs. Millennials tend to want bullets. Know who's on your team, know who your stakeholders are, and then at the same time, schedule. Right now, it is 11:40 a.m. in the US, in Florida, where I am. I know it's in the evening for you guys. Catelo and I were chatting last week, and I would respond to her like 5 hours later because she would write to me when she thought about something, and I would respond to her when I woke up because of our time difference. You need to take these things into consideration as well. If the majority of your team is in one time zone and you have one or two people in a different time zone, don't always sacrifice their schedule. Every once in a while, do it according to their schedule, just to show respect to them and to show that they are an equal partner on the team. So those are some of the key things that will really help build your team and make a difference. And I promise I'm going to get into techniques soon. But aside from communication, when I showed you these wonderful, embarrassing pictures of myself, you guys mentioned something prior that is exactly in the direction that I was going with. And just for the sake of time, I usually do more chats, but one of the really important things with me sharing my embarrassing pictures is that I was humanizing the environment. I was showing you a little bit of who I am. I was being vulnerable to you guys and creating that where people above work. And if we have a good relationship, this will hopefully help me create a trust between us. Trustworthy is one of our underlying competencies, which really goes a long way. If I'm going to stand out here and let you into my world, hopefully you're going to let me, as a stakeholder, hopefully you're going to let me into your world a little bit. And then hopefully that will create a better bond. It would help us understand each other's perspectives and, again, gain value in a much easier way. I mentioned retrospectives earlier and perspectives. So hopefully most of us know what a retrospective is, which, you know, at the end of one of your iterations, you want to sit there and say what worked, what didn't work, and how we can make it better. A lot of teams do this, but then fail to take it to the next level. It's like, great, you have all this content now of how we can make things better. Actually make it better. And this is what I started calling perspectives. Like, now you have all this information, put it at the beginning of your project. Start it off at the beginning. Whenever you have a new kickoff, you turn around and you say, hey, we already learned this. Let's learn from our mistakes. Let's make it better. Let's implement all these changes so that we could be ahead of the game. And that's where I was going with perspectives. Do not forget to apply your lessons learned. That is the whole reason why we do retrospectives. And across the board, I think every organization that I've worked at, I see that that's a piece that we struggle with often. So make sure, again, that you apply what your learnings are. So when you kick off a project, as it says, you want to set the stage, you want to build your relationships, you want to create that trust and openness and be vulnerable. And, you know, think outside the box and how you could get to get these goals initiated with your team. A lot of organizations just want to jump in and you don't have time to sit around and get to know each other. Trust me, if you take the time to do it up front, the rest of your project and iterations would be so much easier later. So you want to do it early, and then you want to just keep doing it continuously. Have checkpoints, have learning opportunities throughout. And why am I not entering? I just moved to the wrong place. There we go. So jumping into actual techniques. Hopefully you're familiar with user stories, and I'm going to simplify this a little bit so that I could make it complex. So a basic user story is, as a user role, I want, this is my goal, so that this is the benefit. That's as simple as it gets. I like to add extra elements to it. I usually do this also interactively. How many of you know what that cup is. What does that glass symbolize? And feel free to put it in the chat as well. And I'm going to keep chatting, but I'm curious to see if anybody guesses what it is. But there's a particular name to what that is. And maybe there's a delay with the chat or you guys are being quiet, but I put this glass here because I wanted to make a big deal about this glass so that hopefully, yes, we got it. It is a Moscow Mule. I'm excited that someone actually put that in there. I like to make a big deal about this so that it sticks. Include Moscow into your user stories. Many times I see user stories that it's just, I want, I need, I want, I need. Break that cycle. Stop with the I want, I need. Whenever you write a user story from now on and catch each other, call each other out if any of you work together. Include Moscow. It makes such a difference. So instead of saying I want is I must, I should, I could, or I won't. Combine techniques. By combining techniques, it makes them that much more efficient. So include the Moscow into your user stories. It's made such a difference for me. And then you also have, hold on, I switch back to the chat so I don't need to come back. User stories also have acceptance criteria. We do estimates, we set priorities. I'm going to get into estimates and priorities on my next slide. But first I wanted to talk about linking them to strategic goals. I know most of us might use a system that doesn't have an extra field. Add it into your naming convention if needed, but include your strategic goal or your enterprise overarching goal. So if someone's asking, hey, I must have this, why? What company, what overarching enterprise goal does this request tie to? If you're asking for, I don't know, a desktop phone, simplifying it, you're asking for a desktop phone, but then your organization is planning on getting rid of the phone system, it's a mismatch. You're going to work on things that have no purpose. So you want to make sure that whatever changes you're doing to your system or your environment are in sync with the overarching enterprise goals. And do it at each user level, at each user story level. Again, if you're not able to add a field that ties it to it, create a naming convention, but make sure you tie it to a strategic goal. It's going to also help you when you're doing your grooming sessions. It's easier to prioritize if you know which are the important goals for the organization. And I mentioned estimates and priority, and I wanted to share this one with you, which really makes a difference for me as well. I'm sure most of you have seen surveys, or you've seen mainly surveys, when you get a scale that looks something like this, and it's usually 5 points. There's usually a neutral in the middle. And they ask you, oh, how much did you really like this? Or in our case, if we're going to tie it to a user story, how much do you really need this user story? Do you need it a little bit or do you need it a lot? You have that in the middle, that neutral. Get rid of the neutral. Do an even scale. And again, you could tie it back to all your user stories as well. If you have an even scale, there's no neutrality. People tend to go for that neutral point. If you give them a reason to go meh, they'll go meh. But if you remove that neutral and you just give them 4 or 6, it doesn't have to be 4, you could say, how much do you need this? Do you just need it or do you really need it? Or do you want to remove it or do you really want to remove it? It emphasizes the importance on a scale without neutrality. You could add these, whether it's for judging or priority, you could add these to your user stories as well. They go a long way because most people tend to just be impartial. And even if they're impartial, are they impartial on the positive or impartial on the negative? There's always some sort of angle to go into if you don't have that neutral area. 5 whys. I know I'm going through these a little fast, but feel free to reach out to me after and we could have a full-blown conversation on these. Most of us are familiar with the 5 whys. My favorite technique. My parents say I've been working on it since I was a little girl, that I ask way too many questions. Make sure that when you ask your whys, they're with intention, they're deliberate, they have purpose. You don't want to annoy your stakeholders. But one of the things, and again, I absolutely love the 5 whys. Depending on my stakeholder, sometimes they might get defensive when you start asking 5 whys. If you notice that your stakeholders are becoming defensive, then switch it to a what. It changes the mood of the conversation. It provokes them telling you, oh, let me explain why, or let me explain what it is that I want. And they go da 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 da, and they go into detail because you're not as defensive. And it really depends on your stakeholders, but just rephrasing your question provokes a different response completely. And you'll know which stakeholders you could just have conversations with and ask, and which ones you have to deliberately be careful with how you frame your questions. This one I'm going to give to you as homework, but I wanted to keep it on here anyway, and it goes a little bit to that different perspectives exercise. When you're asking what value are you seeking, you get your response. And when you get that response, you say, okay, blah, 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 whatever it was that they said, what makes that important? And you get that response and you turn it into a question. And when you get that response, why hasn't it been done before? Why has it taken the organization this long? Like, if it's that important and it's that key, why hasn't it been done? It provokes, again, a different part of the brain, different reasoning that will help you, again, seek the value in what that they're saying. Sometimes when you do these questions with your team, it's actually going to provoke them to sit there and go, oh, actually, it's not as important as I thought it was. I've been asking for it for so many years that I just kept asking for it, but I really don't need it. So changing, again, the language of the questions goes a long way. So we've talked a little bit about, we've talked a little bit about, now I can't go back. I think there's a delay with my screen and animations. So we talked a little bit about having effective communication and creating the awareness of your expectations. You want to make sure that whatever you do, whatever conversations you have, you always look at them through the perspective, and that's why there's little shoes laying around in some of my slides. You want to make sure you do it from the perspective of your stakeholder. What's in it for them? What value are they looking for? It's not about our experience. It's not about the knowledge that we bring from elsewhere. We definitely influence and we help them get to the decisions that they want, but we want to make sure that we're solving their goals and their needs with our help. So very important, if there's one thing you take away from this more than anything, is build trust, build that communication. At the end of the day, it's all about our stakeholders and making them center of attention and making sure that they receive the value that they are seeking. We should know how valuable we are. I know we don't give each other ourselves enough credit. If you've heard some of my other talks, is we are our number one stakeholder. But in us being our number one stakeholder so that we value ourselves, this is how we value our stakeholders and give them the merit and hopefully the goals that they need. And I know I went through a lot of this information fast. I apologize if it was a little too fast. It's usually an hour presentation, and I do have more information for you to share if you guys want to reach out with me on LinkedIn. But I am open to any questions that have come in. I've tried to take a peek at the chat box at the same time. But if you guys, Cathello, if you could help me if any questions came in, or if someone wants to come off of mute and ask a question, you could do that as well.
Yeah, I'm not actually seeing any questions on the chat, but I think we can open the floor up to anyone who's got a question, a comment, or anything that they liked.
I am surprised if you guys were able to keep up with my rambling.
Hand.
I'll give a comment.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, how
Go
are you
ahead.
doing? More
Good.
just a comment. I think. Sorry, I'm running at the moment, so that's why I'm breathing heavily. No other reason. Um, the the 5 whys. I think that's such a great technique to be using. It's like the thing is that we do use it since we were young, so it's such a basic technique, but it's so effective. And like the one thing I've always grappled with is why 5 whys? Why not 6 or 4 or 3? And I think the point is to ask why many times, because just the first answer you get is not necessarily the root cause or the root issue or the root thing. And by asking why more and more and more, you kind of get to the crux of what's wrong. So yeah, really good point on that.
Yeah, there's been analysis behind it on why 5 is the magical number. I'm going to be honest, I never count how many times I do why. Like my dad says, too many times. I think that the key is that we want to make sure we don't annoy our stakeholders also. We want to get to that root cause of it. And it's more having the conversation so that our stakeholders don't notice how deep down we're drilling, or depending on the stakeholder, is telling them that we are deep down drilling. I said that backwards. And just let them know, listen, I know I'm asking this a lot of, in many different ways, but I want to make sure that we both understand, and a lot of it is help me understand what your needs are. It's okay to, play dumb at the end of it. I need to understand what you want so that I could help you deliver what's going to work for you. And I think once our stakeholders know that we're in this together and our goal is to make their life easier. And sometimes I've had stakeholders that have been extremely difficult, that I've had that difficult conversation where our tone might not have been as professional as it should have been. And we've literally said, listen, I'm here to help you. You need to let me help you. And just getting to that understanding, having a difficult conversation sometimes takes it to the next level. And it creates a relationship that they will really help you succeed so that they could succeed as well. And I have had those stakeholders that have gotten defensive and have told me, stop asking why. And I turned around, I said, okay, well, what is it? Help me get to an understanding of your position. And it's visualizing. For me, I'm very visual. So I have to visualize myself in their position. And I'm pretty good about perspectives, where they'll talk to me and I'm literally like visualizing their journey of struggles. Yes.
Sorry. I was just checking if I'm audible.
No.
I hope, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Sorry, I missed some of your presentation and hopefully I can catch up later. But my biggest question, I've been a BA for a while. My biggest question now is, how do you handle a high pressured, like very fast paced environment where you feel like, you know what, I know how to do analysis, I have the skill, but there's no time. How do you bridge the gap to still deliver quality? Because you just told, you know what, do this thing, it's needed tomorrow. You get given a requirement today and tomorrow you must deliver. And I'm like, I need time. How do you negotiate that? How do you navigate that?
That, I think, is a story of our life. I think most of the participants on this call could at one point or another say that they were in the same shoes. What I have noticed has worked for me, and I've tried it, and I've worked for some large companies where everything was due yesterday. And it's like, okay, just have that one conversation with that person that's telling you, hey, it needs to get done right away. Perfect. I will do it right away. This is going to be the outcome. This is the only information I have. And because this is the only information I have, I can only deliver this much. And give them the awareness of, it's going to be half of what it should be, or a third of what it should be, because you don't have the data that you need. And it's sometimes as simple as creating the awareness. You're going to have to compromise because you're still not going to get all the time you want. It's very rare that we get the time that we need, but you just create that awareness. This is what we have. And with this information, you're going to get, garbage outcome.
Yeah. but then the problem becomes that it just looks like you're being lazy when you give them half the stuff. When you tell them, this is the only stuff I can produce with the time you've given me and the data you've given me. And it just looks like, you know what, you didn't spend time. But there was no time.
Well, the other thing is if it's something that you've already been working on for a while, and it really depends the scenario that you're in, if you only have some information, it's also on us throughout the process to let them know. Like if they give you, and I don't know what your timelines are, but if you have 3 days to meet with your stakeholders, don't wait until the third day to say you need more time. We usually know up front, or even sometimes before we even meet with the stakeholders, that there's no way that with the magnitude of the scope, you're going to be able to do it in the time frame. But you want to make sure that periodically you're giving, hey, I met with so-and-so, and they have a lot of content, they have a lot of information. I don't think we're going to meet our deadline. Help us get more time. And have constant communication. The same way that we want our stakeholders to communicate with us, we need to do the same thing with the team. And it's not an easy task. It's easier said than done. But it's a lot of communication for us. That if there's one thing that our career revolves around, it's communication, and it's on us more than anybody else to create it with the team.
Well done. Thank you for the question. On that note, we have actually run out of time, and I don't know if you guys are comfortable to take one more question. As mentioned, the other questions will, please, if you don't mind, take them to the IIBA South Africa chapter page. Post your questions there. Danelkiss is going to make sure she answers those questions over there. Do you guys have time for one more question?
I'm good.
Okay. I'll take the first question from Brandon. He's asked, how do you measure business value?
Measure business value. Ooh, that's a good one. It depends on my stakeholder. So, and I think tying it back to those enterprise goals, what might be valuable today or what might be valuable to one team might not be valuable to someone else, or it might not be valuable next month. And I think 2020 has definitely proved that to us with all the weird changes that we have. So I like, again, going back to my enterprise, the strategic goals. Usually every organization has yearly goals. And I like to tie everything I do to those yearly goals for that same reason. If the goals were valuable enough to make them the organization goal for the year, therefore my work should be just as valuable to tie it to that. And if I can't tie it to a strategic goal, it automatically loses points on my value scale. But that's a great question. It's not something that's black and white. It really depends on your stakeholders and the goals.
Well done. That was well answered. Teppo, can I leave it to you now to take on the next section?
Yeah, okay. So I think Wanda asked, what is Moscow?
Moscow is one of our techniques that we have listed in the BABAC. It's a root cause analysis, and it's an acronym that stands, the M is for must, like I must have this change. S for should, this should happen. I should have this change. The C is for could, and the W is for won't. So the system won't, blah, blah, blah. And we could take that on the chat as well, and we could get into a bigger explanation of what it is on the South Africa page.
So we've still got a few more questions, and I think for those of you who have joined us for today, really, really appreciate your time. Feel free, if you don't want to stay for the remaining questions, to dial off. Appreciate your time. As mentioned, do go on to the IIBA South Africa chapter LinkedIn page and post more questions there should you have. Danelkiss seems keen to stay on for a few more questions. So I think we'll continue to just run through the questions we've got on the chat. So feel free to also stay if you want more of the answers. But if you cannot, we appreciate your time and thank you so much. All right, there's also another question from Nonjabulo. Her question is, can you please give me an example in your previous experience and interactions with different stakeholders where you used humanizing communication versus non-humanizing it?
I could say that personally, 90% of my work has always been humanizing. I'm very big on building relationships, and something as easy as having just coffee with someone, finding out, do they have a pet? Do they have kids? Do they just being a person before being a coworker, I think goes a long way. There's times that I could say that I've been in on projects that were not humanizing. I've had, for instance, I worked for a financial software company, and finance people tend to just be very black and white. This is what I want. This is when I need it. And there's no space for conversations and interaction. At least was my experience when I worked at that organization. So it was very difficult for me to find that human side of things. And it took coffee breaks in the lunchroom. And, I'm guilty, and this is going to sound really wrong, and I can't believe I'm saying this, and it's being recorded. I am guilty of needing to build a relationship with a particular C-level executive that I used to work for. And sitting at my desk and looking down, this is years ago, sitting at my desk, looking down the hallway and noticing that she went into the ladies' room. And I got up and I went to the ladies' room because there was no other way for me to even say hello to this lady. So I walked in and I pretended that I was fixing my makeup, and I waited for her to come out of the stall. We washed our hands together, and I was able to say, "Oh, how's it going?" And doing this small talk, and then asking, because I needed to build more time and I didn't necessarily want to hang out in the ladies' room. I did I was looking for XYZ in the break room earlier and I couldn't find it. Would you happen to know where we keep it? So she walked with me to the break room and helped me find the sugar that I really wasn't looking for. But it's a little white lie that helps you have interaction with someone to get that humanizing side of it. And then and that just triggers other conversations. You could talk, about what they're wearing, or, how pretty their nail polish is, or anything. If they have a chain that says #1 mom, oh, how many kids do you have? Something just to say, hey, I'm a person, not just a coworker. It helps build I know it sounds weird, but there's a psychology behind it, that when you have a relationship with someone, they're more keen to help you with whatever it is you're trying to gain. And so again, for me, I said 90%, it's probably more like 98%, that I always bring the humanizing side of stuff. If you guys could use my background, let's say I'm your stakeholder and we're on a Zoom meeting, you could easily say, oh, you like sailing. I mean, technically I don't, but I love the ocean. I've never sailed. So you could use things in the background as conversation starters. I'm trying to see what side my video is on. Maybe not. My grandma, there's a picture of my grandma and I can't see where my camera is going, but there's a picture of my grandma and I. You could, bring that up as a conversation. I have my cap from graduation on the wall. There's little things that you could pick up to start the conversation to turn it into that human side of things. I hope that helps a little bit. I'm not sure if it actually answered your question.
The next one comes from Lisa Adams. She says, you have worn many hats and had many different roles. Do you keep your base as a BA, and if so, why?
Yes, absolutely. Of all the titles I've ever had, at the end of the day, my brain is a BA brain. There's no off button. I mean, I think we could even say that for when we, do laundry or go to the grocery store. How many of you guys, when you're going to the grocery store, you might have it in sections so that you don't have to go down every aisle, or mine looks more like a little process flow if I show you my grocery list. There's really no off button in what we do, at least for me. My brain has just always been a BA brain. The community that I live in at one point was getting rid of all the BAs because everybody was going agile, and they, oh, you just need a scrum master and you need a developer and we're good. And BAs started being taken out of the equation. Luckily, those companies have also woken up and have noticed the need to have a BA on the team. But in that era, I became a product owner. One of the hats that I wore was product owner. And that organization wanted nothing to do with BAs at all whatsoever. The CIO had had very bad experience with some of the BAs he had worked with. And luckily, I knew someone on the inside that was able to vouch for me and vouch for my work as a person, not necessarily as just a BA. And I was given the role of product owner without having that title previously. And after the first project, I did 4 different iterations. And after the first, that project was done, I sat with the CIO and I said, everything I've done has been BA work. You could call me whatever it is you want to call me. I'm not sure if that was just on my side. My speaker just made a weird noise. But at the end of the day, regardless of what title I've had, I have always done analysis behind everything. And I took pride in being able to tell that manager that did not like business analyst to say, by the way, call me whatever you want to call me. I'm a business analyst. And shortly after that, he revamped the team, and we actually brought in 5 different BAs on the team because the product owners were very keen on their product and they only wanted to see their piece excel, where I was able to just be more of an enterprise BA and look at all the different components of all the products and being able to deliver a better product across the board. So don't be shy from educating. I'm not sure if that's the right way of saying it. Some of our executives and letting them know that, once you gain certain techniques, you don't lose them. It drives my family crazy. We're doing stuff around the house and I'm asking for options and process flows and it gets crazy.
Thanks, Danelkiss. Very good answer. There's another question from iPhone. The question is, how does one build trust relationships with the business stakeholders?
Exactly with what I was sharing. It's building those relationships. You need to be vulnerable for them to be vulnerable with you. If you're uptight and quiet and you don't share who you are, don't expect them to share who they are with you. And once you build that trust and relationship, it happens second nature. We've noticed that we've actually had some conversations with some of our other chapters with the backgrounds. Now that everyone's virtual, there's a lot of the virtual backgrounds, which sometimes are absolutely needed. Trust me, I've been on some meetings that I wish they had a virtual background. But this is a simple way. I am letting you into my home. I am letting you into a little bit of who I am. So even if we were sitting here and I was just a participant like you guys and I said absolutely nothing and I was on mute the entire time, you still know something about me. And again, it's a trickle effect.
That's powerful. Thank you. All right, then we've got another question, but this is not actually for you. The question is, what is the link to post the questions? I've just posted the link right at the bottom if you check responses. So I've posted the link to the LinkedIn page for more questions. Alternatively, you can email your questions to johannesburg@southafrica.iba.org. That was a question by Richard, from Richard. Then we've also got another question from Zinke. Will the presentation be uploaded on YouTube? So if Danelkiss is comfortable with us posting this presentation on YouTube, we will be posting it. Okay, I see a thumbs up. We'll definitely be posting it on YouTube then. Right, I can't really see any other. Okay, Richard's asked another question. Do you think the same principles on building trust apply within your team?
Yes, absolutely. I think your team, more than anything, you absolutely have to have trust. And part of it is just even knowing each other, or, if for whatever reason, let's say something happened this morning and I could not attend the session. I know that my team would step in and at least present something to you guys. Maybe not my presentation, but they would have my back. They would step in wherever I left off, or they would have my voice. They will know what to say for me. If something, if something goes wrong, or even if let's say, I don't know, I'm working in the middle of a project, and like if I have the trust with my team, it empowers all of us to know how far we could take a conversation. So for instance, if you guys were to turn around and ask me for something, I can't think of anything right now, I know how far I could say yes before I need to ask my boss. It's that whole balance of, if you have that trust with it, it's kind of like jump in and then ask for forgiveness later, because you know how far you could push it. It kind of goes in the same direction. So I think more than anything, your immediate team, you need to have the trust and just be authentic. That seems to be my 2 words for the year are authentic and elevate. We need to be authentic with ourselves, so that we can be transparent with our community. And then by doing so, it's going to help us elevate ourselves. And as we elevate ourselves, we elevate our community and our profession. You guys, we're all in this together. And we're all in this together. That's all I have to say. It's we make ourselves better. We make each other better. And there's some people in our communities that learn and harness that information so that they show off and they look better. I don't think that's a BA quality. I don't think that's a BA thing. I think in general, we tend to learn and then share what we learn so that everybody else could value from it. And it just makes us special. It makes us different. And, back to one of the earlier questions, I am a BA at heart, and I always will be, regardless of what my title is. And I apply that to work and life in general. It's always seek value, always look for better outcomes. Both
Wow.
personal and work.
Wow, I've got so many notes to take. Thank you so much, Danelkiss, for making today. We really, really appreciate the time, and we are considerate of the fact that, we are worlds apart, but you were able to sacrifice some time for us and share a lot of your knowledge. And I trust everyone in the session found this insightful. I saw very many positive comments, couldn't read them out. But there were lots of good comments with regards to how beneficial this talk was and the value that they got from it. So thank you so much for that. And then to everyone else on the call, thank you for making it. Wouldn't do it without you. I appreciate your time as well. Please note we have another session on Thursday. Go to the IIBA SA website, check under the events page for more events, register, tell your friends, and let's all learn together. Thank you guys so much. Have a lovely evening further.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Danelkiss. Really appreciate this.
Thank you. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yes. Cheers, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.